Hey guys, we are on 6.6 density and land use. So today we're going to be looking at how low, medium, and high density housing characteristics represent different patterns of residential land use. So things like residential buildings and patterns of land use reflect and shape the city's culture, technological capabilities, cycles of development, and something called infilling, which we will get to in just a bit. So again, what are these patterns of urban residential land use? So we're looking at patterns, we're using our spatial thinking or geographic thinking to try to understand why these patterns exist. So again, some little recap, this idea of population density, we went over in unit 2. So this is just the amount of people that occupy a specific unit of land. So high density means that there's a lot of people, low density means that there's not many people. And then residential, this is a term to describe places in which people reside. So if we look at these images here, we have high density residential. So essentially in each block, there's tons of people, right? We're building upward. There's a lot more apartment buildings, a lot more people, higher density. Medium density residential, still we see these row houses kind of clustered together. These are typically single family units. So definitely not as dense as having an apartment complex there. So medium density. And then low density, right? Just a single family house with a big yard and lots of space. So definitely low density. So again, this whole idea of bid rent theory, just this underlying concept of the value of land and how it's influenced by its distance from the CBD. So again, you are going to see this so many times. That is a concept that you need to know in your hearts and your souls. So land closest to the CBD is accessible. So it costs the most money. Typically, we see residential density high. Expensive land plus small plots of land, because you're building upward, equals high residential density. So think of like big apartment buildings. Land furthest from the CBD is less accessible, so it costs less money. Therefore, residential density will be lower. So less expensive land plus availability of larger plots equals lower residential density. So think of these two photos, right? This would be closer to the city center, whereas this will be further out from the city center. This will be more expensive. This will be less expensive when we talk about per unit of space. So residential land use and culture. So historically, older international cities, places like Paris, Tokyo, Amsterdam, so many others, developed before advancements in transportation technology. So because of major advancements in transportation technology happening far later, we see this land being organized differently. So areas where people live, where people work, where people buy and sell things and services, these are typically all within walking distance of one another, because people didn't have that transportation technology to be able to drive right from one place to another place so quickly. So essentially we see more apartment buildings in city centers, higher population densities, and less space for the use of cars. So in a lot of these older European cities, we see narrower streets, right? Families are also more likely to gather in public places just because there's space that was built in for that. So in newer cities, so like let's say the United States, right? That's a newer place than a lot of these older European countries. They were developed around transportation technology. So that meant that people were able to then travel longer distances from home to work or going to the store and things like that. So transportation technology impacts residential land use. People can move into suburban areas with larger plots of land due to the availability of the automobile. So essentially, we see that resulting in the development of suburbs, suburban sprawl as well, economic and ethnic segregation, more air pollution, and then also this idea of a culture of privacy because you have a lot more space in between your homes. So land use and development, we have zoning policies. These are created by municipal or local governments, and they dictate how you can use this land. So zoning is a regulation about what type of development or land use can occur in a specific location. So these are typically designated as residential, commercial, or industrial. So things like, are you allowed to place a noisy, dirty factory next to your suburban neighborhood? Typically the answer is no. And then also, are you allowed to build a skyscraper apartment building Or can there only be 3 floors high? So these are all zoning laws that help to determine how that land is going to be used. It impacts residential density as well, because zones can be changed from only allowing the development of single family homes to allowing apartment buildings. So you will see areas that apartment buildings are not allowed to be built. This would increase housing density of a location while also increasing affordable housing and access to infrastructure and high quality services. So that's just one potential result. And then this idea of infilling. So even if you just break down that word and think about that word, this is the redevelopment of vacant land or unused land to improve the surrounding area. So one way that we see this is previous industrial areas can be converted into offices, housing, entertainment venues, and so on. This increases the density of the area and also changes that land use pattern. So in this example here, this is an example from Cincinnati, Ohio. This building was built in 1904 as a warehouse, and now it has been turned into a multi-use development that has offices, even a wedding venue, an escape room, and a lot of other businesses. So again, what are the patterns of urban residential land use and why do those patterns exist?